Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ralph World, where we talk about nostalgia, its effects on the culture today, and whether or not it actually works. And I am Mac, and with me, as always, is
Uncle Britt.
And today we're going to be talking about video games. Because video games, I think we can both agree, is that one thing that has pretty much been there through both of our lives, has changed a lot through both of our lives, and tends to not let certain franchises die, which we'll talk about more in depth later in the episode. But to start with, if you don't mind, I'd like to go first and talk about my start with video games, because I feel like where I end is going to be either where you pick up or where it will overlap where you pick up.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. So when I was a child, back in the early 80s, there was really one video game system that I can remember, and that was the Atari system. There were computer games where you had like 5.5-inch floppies and you would pop it into like an IBM and you would play Oregon Trail or something like that. But as far as like video games as we know them go, it was really the Atari, and the graphics were absolutely nothing to talk about. But don't get me wrong, like I feel like we owe a lot to the Atari, because if it wasn't for the Atari, I'm not sure we would be where we're at now, or it would have taken longer to get here.
Well, if nothing else, the Atari itself created the concept of a console in your house.
Yeah.
Like, you could have an arcade. That's a game you can play in your house at that time, but that's not what you think of when you think of gaming today.
No, and the arcades at the time, the graphics in the arcade cabinets were much better than they were for the Atari console. What's interesting to me is about the mid-90s, maybe even into the early 2000s, you started to see that change over, where like the home systems were actually giving you better graphics than the cabinets. But with the Atari, everything was real blocky, everything was real basic movement. You had a stick and a button.
No, you had two buttons.
No, the original Atari just had that square with the one big thumb button.
I thought you had one on the side and then one on it.
Oh, that came with the next system. The first system, the wood panel one, it was just a button on a base and a stick. And don't get me wrong, we had a blast with that because it was all that we knew. Then there was the Atari. There was, I think, Activision then became like the big competitor with them, where they kept upping the graphics. Like it went from like 4-bit to 8-bit to 16-bit, and like that was like the big thing. But then the world changed when the Nintendo Entertainment System landed on US shores, and all of a sudden people were talking about 32 bits and then 64 bits.
Oh, we're not to 64 yet. That's a little...
But the Nintendo really changed the way we looked at video games, changed the way we interacted with video games. Instead of a stick and a button, now you had the directional pad, 2 buttons, start and stop. You could pause games if you needed to.
And even to my understanding, that wasn't commonplace either.
Not at first. That became much more common as people started to realize, hey, it's cool if I can just, go to the bathroom.
Yeah, right in the middle of Contra. I need to pee.
Yeah. But that was like really the genesis of what I think we consider video games today. And then, of course, after the Nintendo, you had somebody that was chasing Nintendo, which then was Sega. And you had the Sega system, then you had the Sega Saturn, Sega Genesis. And then Nintendo, you had like Nintendo Entertainment System, the N64.
The Super Nintendo.
That's right. I keep forgetting about the Super Nintendo. The SNES. And those, it was like just those two for the longest time until Sony came on the scene with the PlayStation 1. And now they're putting video games on discs.
Can I give you a fun fact about that?
Yeah.
So at that time, when when Sony was developing a PlayStation, they wanted to pitch it to the other companies. They wanted to pitch it to Nintendo. They wanted to pitch it to Microsoft. No one wanted it.
Really?
So they ended up making it themselves. But there is out there a proof of concept of a prototype of a Nintendo PlayStation. Like,
Really?
yeah, I don't know if it like works or anything like that, but like at very least proof of concept, there is a Nintendo PlayStation out there.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Well, I think they lucked out though.
And then Sega's last gasp, because when it came down to those three, at some point, Sega started to get left behind. And their last gasp was the Dreamcast, which I feel like is a highly underrated system, but it was just so overshadowed by what Nintendo and more specifically the PlayStation had going on. GameCube, Nintendo didn't hit discs until the GameCube when they came out with those mini discs. Now, as far as my exposure to video games goes, I actually sat out much of the late 80s, early 90s of video game systems. That, like, I had Nintendo, I had the Nintendo Entertainment System, then my brother, who actually stuck with video games more than me, went up to, at least while he was still living at home, like the Sega Genesis. But then he also bought, he bought the PlayStation 1, and then he moved out. And when he moved out with the PlayStation 1, I really wasn't into consoles anymore at that point. I was still, like, arcades still existed, and, like, I would go to the arcades with my friends and everything. But video games at that time never really grabbed me, and I don't exactly know why. Like, there were a few that really hooked me in, but nothing was done with them for the longest time. Or I was at that point where I was like, I can't justify buying a whole console because I want to play one game. Like, I can't justify buying an N64 because I want to play the Ocarina of Time, and that's pretty much it. But then when we got to what I think is, like, at least the silver age, maybe the golden age of modern video gaming, was, I feel, the generation of consoles that started this whole three-way war. The PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the original Xbox.
I would agree with that. And that's more so where I started with that.
Okay.
Like, I wouldn't say GameCube was big for me or in my area. Like, I knew people who had GameCubes, but it was predominantly you either had Xbox or you had PlayStation.
Okay.
And me personally, I've always been a PlayStation person. Specifically PlayStation 2. That one was like my console for years. Then finally got the PS3, and like that specifically was mine. The PS2 was the family's. The PS3 was bought for me. So that became the longest running series or longest running console in my life up until I think 3 years ago. I finally bought a PS4.
Okay.
I was dedicated to that 3, man. But at that war, the GameCube, the Xbox, and the PlayStation, it was just everywhere. Like, if you had a conversation about games, you compared the 3.
And the funny thing is, I went from no consoles to I had all 3 of those. The first one I bought was the GameCube. And the main reason I bought the GameCube was because, like I just said, there was like a few games, a few franchises, a few series that like could really draw me back. The GameCube had the one that drew me back, and that was Metroid Prime. I absolutely loved the Metroid games growing up. And like that was one of the main reasons I had a Game Boy, was because they had the technology for the Game Boy had advanced so far that like pretty much every Metroid game that had been made up to that point could be held in your hand, including like Metroid Zero, which was a fantastic game. And then so I was always playing Metroid. But then whenever Metroid Prime series came out, I was first person in the armor. Are you kidding me? Yes. And I really think GameCube was underrated on their graphics. I think their graphics were phenomenal for that era, for Metroid. Like, I think their in-house games, because they were utilizing the tech as best they could, the Nintendo games looked fantastic. But because it was on a little disc and it was different coding, like any third-party games looked better on like the Xbox or the PS2.
Okay, yeah, I would get behind that because I've played some horrendous looking GameCube games, and I'm not saying from today's standard. I mean, like, Dude, things were looking straight out of an Atari. Like, it was bad.
Really? You think so? Okay.
I mean, obviously I'm exaggerating, but some of them just, like, it was surprising. Like, people joke today about PS2 era graphics and how they're very blocky, but you could still very clearly tell what something's trying to be.
Yes.
Yeah, there were some GameCube games where I'd straight up look at a rock and be like, is this a save point? Why is the pattern like this?
Well, but like with the GameCube, for me, you had Metroid Prime, which I still love those graphics. I still think the first two Metroid Primes on the GameCube, I still think hold up. I'm not saying I would compare them to the graphics today, but I think they hold up for what they were. And then the one that really sold me on it was The Wind Waker.
Oh,
The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker.
I don't know what genius came up with cell shading, but cell shading by far in the world of gaming has had the most longevity. Because you could make a game today with cell shading and it would look almost the same as Wind Waker. Obviously different aesthetics and everything,
Right.
and it's a little crisper now, but the fact that you can still get the same basic animation from it, like, it's crisp.
Wind Waker was like really ahead of its time.
It
with
was.
its graphics, and they used it to the fullest potential because that game was huge. Like, I don't think you could really can call it open world, but there was a lot you could do in that
big
game.
world.
Yeah, it was a big world. Yeah, there was a lot you could do with that. Even just sitting there, and given that sometimes like sailing from island to island would take you 3 minutes, just because of how good it looked, it never got boring. It was never like, oh, I got to do this again. It was more like, I get to sail again. And by the way, before we go any further, what we completely dropped the ball on is I'm probably, as much as I love video games now and as I play video games almost every day, I'm really, even I consider myself more of a casual gamer because I have a very limited scope of what I play. Uncle Britt over here, on the other hand, though.
Guilty pleasure charged. I collect video games. I have an Atari, NES, SNES, GameCube, PlayStation, 1, 2, 3, 4, Xbox, 360, 1. Terrible naming conventions.
Wasn't it though? Yeah. Yeah.
But
so
needless,
like, don't let him. No, I was like, don't let him like. He doesn't just collect video games. He collects like the consoles.
I am not a fan of the digital games. Like, I understand people buy stream and they'll do downloadable content, and I get it. Like, if you are just trying to play games, that is such a hassle-free way to do it. I completely agree. But for me, like, I grew up on games. Games have been around my entire life. As with you, it was just a little more involved with mine because they were already established. They were already plethora of games out there. Whereas, you know, to my understanding, it was a lot more limited with you.
It was the maybe not the games were limited, but quality games were limited.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being the collector that you are. I'm sure, and if you're listening to this, you've probably heard about it too. The ET landfill. Like, there's a reason that happened. The game was bad.
However, and I own ET. I own one of the copies. It's Angry Video Game Nerd actually said this first, if any of you out there know who that is. But he said that it's really not a bad game. Like, it's not good. Like, you're not going to enjoy your life while you're playing it. But the whole stigma around, like, it just being the worst game in the world, that it's impossible, it's all that... It's a game.
I think the problem was that it didn't live up to the expectations, that because Atari was really pushing that game, was really pushing that it was going to be like the next big thing, that it was going to be the next step for video gaming, and it turned out being just a really bad copy of like Pitfall or something like that.
And that game almost single-handedly, and I say that with a little bit of liberty, almost single-handedly is what caused the giant just down spiral of video games at the time.
Because at the time, like what we just talked about, it was really Atari and maybe Activision, but like you didn't have the consoles. Like going into Nintendo showing up on the scene and changing the world, that's kind of what I mean. That like I think there's a lot to owe to Nintendo for salvaging, not necessarily saving, but salvaging the video game landscape at the time.
Without the NES, and I mean without the Atari, yeah, but without the NES, there would be no PlayStation or Xbox right now. There probably wouldn't even be Steam, like the whole PC end of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying something else wouldn't have come up, but the landscape that we know it as today is directly from the NES. Like, Nintendo could completely duck out of the video game market today. The entire company folds under. What they did for that industry, you can't go around it. Like, they are the grandfather of video games here. Like, there's no other way to say it. No. You can prefer Microsoft, you can prefer Sony, you can prefer Nintendo. People split all the time. But you will not find someone in any camp that's going to sit here and say, hey, we don't need Nintendo. We needed Nintendo to get here.
And it's amazing that they were like a card company.
Yeah, they're over 100 years old. And they started making cards, and now they have an Italian plumber and some little twink boy. I think what's an underrated thing when it comes to video games, whether new, old, in between, casual, whatever, is I think just appreciating the beauty in some games is very undervalued, because you even just said that about Wind Waker, that sometimes it was just fun to literally just float on the water and look at everything, and like it's just fun to look at. I have the exact same experience with God of War, the new God of War games. I'm currently playing through Ragnarok, for those of you listening who are aware of that, and it is just... It's based in Norse mythology, so it's very nature heavy. It's woods, it's sands, ocean. It's just anything nature and whatnot. So it's just very pretty. Yeah, like you can be running through the woods killing demons and whatnot, but then you stop for a second, you look around, and you're like, wow, there's a bunch of monkeys flinging around. There's some bugs over there, and I'm not even exaggerating. Like they put bugs and whatnot on the ground that I've watched just move.
And a game that me and Ben and my brother all play, that even whenever we're just like riding through the woods and we say, man, they really did a lot with this engine, is that we play Elder Scrolls Online. And the thing that impressed us the most about that engine is that, one, at nighttime, you can actually track the movement of the moon, and you can gauge how much longer night is going to be based on the moon position. Or during the day, the sun rises and the sun sets, but when it's setting or when it's rising, and if you're in the woods, you get those shafts of light coming through the trees and everything. Which in a console game, that's not such a big deal. But I feel like in an MMO, a server-based MMO like that, I feel like that's not really done all the time.
No, you very easily could have just done a line, and this is where the light is now, and it's moving forward, and that's now it's day.
Because, like, you can do housing in that game, too. And, like, when you buy the house, it's just completely empty, and whenever the sun rises on one side and sets on the other side, the angle of the light coming through the windows changes based on where the sun is. But, more to the point, whenever you're decorating the interior of the house and you hang curtains, the light pattern on the floor is now shaped to the shape of the curtains that you're hanging. Like, it's things like that that really, to me, like, these programmers are artists, that they're putting that much time and that much effort into it. And I really think people get too focused sometimes. And I shouldn't say people, like, not everybody, but sometimes I feel like there's a population of the video game fandom that just gets too focused on how good the graphics are and not what they're doing with the graphics at hand. Like, they can't see the forest for the trees, you know what I mean?
Oh, I've met so many people that have, like, flat out told me, they're like, oh, I won't play that game, it looks bad. It's like, I mean, if there's animation styles out there that I do not like, that I will not go to that game for that style because I don't like it. I know I don't like it. Right. But if someone's like, dude, this is the best game I've ever played, like, it beautiful story, the graphics aren't great, but, like, it is so much fun to play, I'm probably going to play it then. Like, if you have that much of a high praise about it, like, a video game's not a movie or a TV show where it's like, well, I really liked this, so you might like it. if you're saying like, dude, I really like this game, you put hours of life into that. So like that's worth taking note of, to be like, if this dude likes this game that much and they have 30 hours in this game or whatnot, I might take their recommendation. It sounds like a good game.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to stray away from, even though I play consoles, like, I don't play like a lot of self-contained console games right now. I don't know why, but like right now I'm really focused in on like the MMO online component games. Whether we're talking about Elder Scrolls Online, whether we're talking about Xenomorph 2 for Dragon Ball. Xenoverse, yes. Xenomorphs are the aliens. Xenoverse is Dragon Ball. Xenoverse 2. Even Need for Speed Heat, which is like, you can play it solo, but you can also be in like this living city where like everybody is driving a car around. It's an older game, so it's not nearly as populated as it used to be, but like things like that, where like just for some reason, like isolated console games for me right now aren't really doing anything for me. And I think it's because, for me, the MMOs have a longevity, that they're always bringing out updates, they're always changing things, that like you buy, like I bought Elder Scrolls Online during the lockdown, and I play that game almost every day now, and there's something new to do almost every day, because they come out with like the new expansions every year.
And I mean, it's worth noting, you played World of Warcraft for a long time.
I did.
Like you were very much into that game and playing it just like you are with this and everything. So you've always leaned a little more towards just the social side of video games, whereas I am 100% story.
Yeah.
Like, give me that game that's self-contained that I'll play for 15, 30, 60 hours, whatever, and I will love it. Like, I want that self-contained story. I don't want other people. Let me in this world and let me explore it.
There are some games that I'm like that, like The Witcher 3, for example. I really like that game. We were just talking about Assassin's Creed before we started this, that like I will play Black Flag over and over and over again just because I like pirates. And to me, an Assassin's Creed game is like the best pirate game on the market right now. I just, for a gift, I was just given Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I have a feeling that I'm going to enjoy that too, because what are Vikings but really beefy pirates?
Knowledge for you guys.
For you.
Jot that down.
We do it for you. And then there's Doom.
Oh, the new ones, yeah.
The new Dooms, where
the
like
heavy metal Doom.
Yeah, where you just go through and you mow things down. But as far as like the game that like really hooked me in during that first generation, it wasn't Metroid Prime, because like I really liked the Metroid Prime games. But Halo became a drug for me. Like Halo 2, I was one of those guys. Halo 2 is the only thing I ever lined up outside at night for. I even had Halo 2 pre-ordered, but I was like, I am getting it as soon as those doors open, and I camped out waiting for Halo 2 to come out. I didn't even freak out that much when Mortal Monday happened, when they finally ported Mortal Kombat over to the home consoles. But when Halo 2 came out, I was that guy.
And hey man, like I said, I was a PlayStation person, so I have now played Halo 1, 2, 3, and I think the start of the fourth one. I haven't finished them yet.
Okay.
But like, I get it. I do. Like, I played the original Halo, I played the remastered Halo, which, if I'm being honest, I would suggest the remastered over the old one.
The Master Chief Edition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it really... That is a clean game, a clean remake.
Yeah.
But
one of the things that I dig about it is with the press of a button, you can bounce back and forth between the old and the new, and you can
even
see,
during cutscenes.
Yeah, and
which
you can
is
see,
weird.
And you can see like how they've improved the graphics for it.
And it's funny you bring Assassin's Creed and Halo up because that leads perfectly into your earlier comment, some games are just way too long running.
Yeah.
Like, it is okay to end a story, and it's also okay to keep a franchise alive if you're taking it to new places.
Right.
But if you're just stagnant in the water, Assassin's Creed, then you need to do something. And Assassin's Creed did do something, except, in my opinion, they don't feel like Assassin's Creed games anymore.
Mm-mm.
Like, Odyssey, Valhalla, they're both like open world games where you pretty much just do whatever you want in that world.
Even Black Flag to a point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that original like stealth, Ezio, Altair, like just being in the Shadow organization and having these very strict rules, and even the whole side with Desmond and the Animus and learning what's going on there while you're learning what's going on with Ezio and the story coming together. Like, it was all interesting. It was all fun. It all felt like Assassins. And then you jump to, like, Black Flag, and great game. It's fun. But like you said, it's the best pirate game out there.
And the thing that I liked about Black Flag was he wasn't really an assassin. Mm-hmm. Like, he stole an assassin's gear and equipment. And then he sort of like stumbled into the assassins, but he was never really an assassin. So like you could sort of give that a pass. But no, I agree with you. What we were talking about was that with video games, probably out of any media, is video games suffer the most, and I'm not even sure suffer is the right word, but suffer the most from the franchises that won't die. Either because they really don't do anything innovative, or they're just banking on this franchise has been going on for so long, we have to keep making it. And the one video game series that I think falls into that is Final Fantasy. Like, what new is Final Fantasy even still going on at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so like, you don't really hear people talking about Final Fantasy too much anymore, but you know those games are still just coming out.
So I will say, and I think this is just more so having to do with the fact that you are a more casual gamer.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy is like doing well.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like,
really?
Especially since they rebooted 7 or remastered 7, I believe it was 7 with Cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the game that came out right before it did extremely well. The game that came out after it, which I'm pretty sure was the one that just came out within the last year, and that one didn't do too well. But outside of maybe that one game, people are...
Oh, wow.
Like, it's a pretty dedicated following, a pretty dedicated series.
Didn't know that.
I think part of it is it's just not as big here.
Okay, yeah, because I cannot remember what the last Final Fantasy game was that I played. I just remember it had a really funky combat system, and it just didn't do anything for like me and my brother.
That's the difficulty of Final Fantasy. They're so different between each game. It's not a series you get behind. Yeah. It's a game you get behind.
And for as much as I loved Halo, if it would have ended at Halo 3, I would have been fine with that. When they were bringing it back and Halo 4 had the promise of starting a new series, I would have been fine with that too. But those games didn't really connect with each other. Like, it didn't feel like a cohesive story, because you went from Halo 4, which was kind of like a re-entry point for the Halo franchise, and was very much, at least to me, a lot of what we had already done, just with like a pretty package, like a prettier package.
An update.
Yeah. But then 5 and Infinite came out, and it just didn't do anything for me. Like, I bought them, don't get me wrong.
You have Infinite.
Yeah. I'm that guy. But
it's one of 12.
Yeah, it doesn't really the storytelling. Like, believe it or not, like, I think when the new studio took over, that, like, they thought it was just a shooter. They thought it was just, like, Call of Duty in space. Like, they didn't take into account that, like, it had a really solid story at its base. Like a futuristic sci-fi holy war where we were the devil. Like, the whole thing, like, was just completely lost when 343 took over. And Halo Reach, I think, is the best, if not the second best game of the series, just for, like, storytelling, the end of it, being able to, like, customize your Spartan the way you want to, just the different things you get to do in it, the different levels and things. I really, really liked that. Another franchise that I think has been going on too long, what was it? I just said I even play it, that one as well, is, like, Need for Speed hasn't done anything really wow for racing games since Most Wanted, which took place on the original Xbox system. That single game outsold every Halo game. And they've never, like, Need for Speed has never touched that since, because, like, they've just never, like, really done anything as innovative or interesting or just fun. Like,
is Need for Speed owned by EA?
Yes, it is. We just answered that question, didn't we? What franchises do you think have gone on too long?
Candy Crush. Been around way too long. I think I'm kind of torn to say Sonic, because on one hand, they need to just let Sonic rest for a while, game-wise. Like, there has not been good Sonic games. There was Sonic Mania. That one was a good game, but for those of you keeping score at home, that was made by a fan. But at the same time, because Sonic has kept trying to keep going and keep rivaling Mario like he once did, he has started to reach popularity again. And I'm sure part of that has to do with the movie franchise.
I was going to say, do you think the movie had anything to do with it?
But even with that, like, they were consistently putting out Sonic games, and they were consistently bad, but he was still around.
I think Sonic's longevity has more to do with comics, cartoons, and the movie now than it did with the games. Like, Sega would pimp that hedgehog out as much as they could across as many different medias as they could. And it didn't seem like anymore that you were watching a cartoon based on a video game, but rather, when the video games became not great, you were playing a video game based on a cartoon or a comic book. For me, Sonic's low point was Shadow. The edgelord that is Shadow.
With guns.
Yeah, that's the whole, like, when you bring guns in, and keep in mind, we are saying this as two people that have seen both movies opening weekend for Sonic, and we know full well Shadow is going to be in the third one, and we're inexplainably excited about it too.
We are both legitimately so excited for this movie. Not the game, though, because hopefully he won't just pull out an AK and just shoot Sonic in the face, you know?
Well, like, one point in the game, wasn't he, like, dual-wielding, like, 45s?
That's the thing that I think really just threw people off, is it wasn't even cartoon guns.
Yeah.
Like, they just gave Shadow real guns. And he started shooting people. Like... The other character has a giant hammer that hits things.
Yeah.
Sonic moves fast and kind of kicks them.
Yeah.
Shadow kills you.
Yeah.
No, but a game series that I almost feel like I'm stabbing it in the back by saying this. Kingdom Hearts.
Yes.
I love that series to death. It is one of the oldest series I have played in my life.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Ratchet and Clank and Kingdom Hearts 1 are the two games that I remember playing originally. More Kingdom Hearts 2, but Kingdom Hearts 1, great game. It's dated now, I'm not going to lie. Sequel, Kingdom Hearts 2, in my opinion, best of the franchise.
Okay.
And then after that, they made a crap ton of in-between games on different consoles. One even came out on your phone.
Yeah.
It was just way too much. And for the story that they're trying to tell, it is literally an long-running joke that Kingdom Hearts has such a convoluted story that you don't even try to follow the story. You just try to figure out what's happening in the game itself.
I don't think that's a joke. I think that's very true. That like I've heard other people say like, yeah, I really don't know what's going on here. We're just playing.
Like if you play the first game, Chain of Memories, and then the second game, that right there, those 3 games tell a coherent story, and you can even throw in the DS game that's like 365/8 days or something like that. All of that tells a very cohesive story that works. 2 still doesn't end on a conclusion, but 3 sucked, man. And this is coming from someone who loves this series. I have defended this series because people were like, oh, it's so cartoony. It's Disney. Why would an adult play that? And it's like, dude, do you not like whimsy? Do you not like joy in life? Do you not enjoy smiling with, like, pixies and fairy dust sometimes? Like, just be happy. I don't know what to tell you. But 3 sucked. Like, you just didn't do anything for 90% of the game. And then the story picks back up at the end.
I think another franchise that if it hadn't been until like a couple of years ago, I would have said this one needs to go away too. And that is a staple in video gaming, which is Resident Evil. Like I have a friend that like his whole thing was Resident Evil. And it got to the point where he was like, he would just buy the games and then put them away. Wouldn't even bother playing them. He just wanted to have the full set. Okay. But then Village came out. And
Village or Biohazard?
Village.
Okay.
Village came out, and it was like that just like reset the entire franchise. I don't know if it, keep in mind, I don't play them, but I don't know if it was because of just like the story was good, if the mechanics were different, if they were introducing different things. I kind of like the idea that when you were in the village, you could go to like different parts of it, and it wasn't necessarily quite as linear as some of the Resident Evil games are, because from what I understand, the Resident Evil games started to get so linear that it felt like you were playing a game on rails. Or like those Telltale games, things like that.
I mean, I can break it down. 1 through 4 is generally considered good. Yeah. Those are good games. People like them. 4 is generally considered the best Resident Evil.
Okay.
And then 5 is where it turned. 5 is where it became an action game instead of a horror game, and that immediately turned people off. And then 6, man, coming off of Kingdom Hearts, 6 was convoluted. Like I think you have 6 or 7 playable characters, and you play all of them through the game.
Holy cow!
But
that's like Call of Duty.
But you're not playing like chapters as each character. No, you play through the game as one, then you play through the game as the next one.
Oh my gosh.
So for the, 2 hours of additional context, you're still just playing the same game.
That just sounds so tedious.
And that's where the series ended for a long time, was at 6, because people were like, no. And that's where the whole rail thing felt, because there were so many characters, none of them had their own thing going on. Right. You just moved forward. But after that, they realized that action wasn't what made Resident Evil popular.
No.
Yeah, I know. The whole thing with evil in the name. But they were smart. They let the series die down. They just left it alone for a couple years, and they started working on the next game, and the next game, 7, was Biohazard. And that was the one that reinvigorated the entire series.
Okay.
That's the one that it became first person for the first time, and it was this very in-depth story. And then Village came after that and kind of concluded that little story of gaming that essentially reframed the Resident Evil universe.
Okay.
So, like, that's an example of a franchise that arguably, like you said, should have stopped, but because they kept going, it got better.
Okay. Now, we were also talking about, before we started recording, we were also talking about franchises that were cut down in the prime of their life. Do you want to go first on this one? Do you have anything off the top of your head? Because we talked about at least 2.
For me, The one that I am upset that never got more, and I wholly don't think anyone's going to be aware of this game at all. It's a game called Singularity. The plot of it is irrelevant, but one of the most fun things about that game is you have a device on your wrist that lets you control this material that in turn controls time. But you can only interact with the things that were made out of that material.
Okay.
So it's like a device that only works on a specific island because that island was built with that material, and it like takes place in Soviet Russia, and it's like on this separate island from everything, and it's just a fun first-person shooter, and it's this cool mechanic, and it's a really, really cool story, and you're traveling through time trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay.
And spoiler alert to a game that almost no one's played, by the end, you're actually figuring out that you're playing almost against yourself.
Okay.
That's the stuff that you did in the beginning of the game. You're now running in like the next room to that, and because you did that out there, it's now hindering you in here. And it's just this cool dynamic of like, if I wasn't here, none of this would have happened, but I am here, so I have to fix it, but being here is what the problem was. So you get stuck in this like repetition, and then you finally have to figure out how to break out of it,
Okay.
suicide bomb, whatever. The fun options. But that game in and of itself, I got so invested in so many times, and I wish they continued it, because it didn't end on a cliffhanger. It was just the world.
Okay.
I thought it was so cool, and how everything was futuristic, but it was futuristic from like 40 years ago futuristic, so it had that aesthetic about it. Like, I just thought that was a really cool game. But the one that you recommended to me that we're both wildly upset about is a game called PsyOps, The Mind Conspiracy.
Mindgate Conspiracy.
Mindgate Conspiracy,
Yeah.
which, I'll be the first to say it, not the best title. It's a lot. It's a mouthful. You wouldn't look at that and be like, oh, that's the Halo killer.
No, and it ended on a cliffhanger, and they fully thought they were going to get their sequel, but then as what happens at that time, because we were coming out of like the Xbox PS2 era, and we were starting to get into like the 360 era, and like there was a lot of shakeup in the video game industry, with like production houses closing, some being absorbed, and it was one of those games that fell victim to nobody really knew who holds the rights to it, as far as I've figured out. And it was a great game, had a killer song going with it. And it ended on a cliffhanger, and like you genuinely became invested in the story. The mechanics were something else. The mechanics were phenomenal. But at the end, when she says, "What do you remember?" and he says, "I remember everything. We need to run." Because the whole thing was he was trying to regain, he was like a government agent that was trying to regain his memories throughout the course of the game, and also found out that he had psychic powers.
PsyOps.
And then at the end when he says, "I remember everything," because they never told you what his whole story was, that like the second game was supposed to be that, and it never came to fruition. And that's one of those ones that like, that's just like a tragedy that we didn't find out how that story ends. Like not through like another video game, not through a comic, not through anything. Like
Even the creator putting out on Twitter, just like, hey, for those of you who played that game, this is what the ending was going to be, or this is what the next.
Oh,
game
I didn't
was
know
gonna
he
be.
did that.
No, I'm saying we haven't even gotten
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But then, of course, we would both be remiss if we didn't talk about the Legacy of Kain.
Legacy of Kain started so rough, but was so. By the time you got to what was the final game?
Vengeance.
Was that it? Legacy of Kain, the one where
that doesn't sound right.
No, the one where Azrael and Kain came together. But the story, that was one of the few franchises I can think of where like the story legitimately was building on what came before it. There was like Legacy of Kain Blood Omen 1, then there was Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, then there was Blood Omen 2, then there was Soul Reaver 2, and then there was the game that like brought both storylines together. And it was phenomenal. Like, I played through most of them as they were happening in real time. But truthfully, the one that I got into first was, I think it was Blood Omen 2 was the first one I played, and then I went back and I played Soul Reaver. I even tried playing the first Legacy of Kain, and that was like a top-down RPG that doesn't really hold up. What?
It's Defiance.
Defiance, yes. Defiance was... There was so much more they could have done after Defiance.
To be clear, I haven't played through the whole series.
Okay.
I couldn't... Blood Omen, the first one, that's a top-down game. I struggle with those.
Yeah.
Soul Reaver, the first game, great game. Except when I played that, I played it on the Dreamcast, and I played it over the span of 12 straight hours in the middle of the night because I was sick. And I couldn't leave the corner of my couch because the cord was so short. So I played at this terrible angle for 12 hours. And for those of you who hate me, you'll love to hear this. I got to about an hour and a half before the end of the game, roughly, and it froze.
I remember you telling me that.
The lever just froze. I literally ran from that point of the game almost back to the beginning to try to get it to reload, but it was in that era of games where they didn't need load screens.
Yes.
So it was just one fluid thing, so nothing could reload. So I was just stuck.
Oh my goodness.
I couldn't even die.
Oh my goodness. That would be bad.
Sorry. But I played that one, and I've always wanted to play Soul Reaver 2, and then Blood Omen 2, and then Defiance.
Well, from what I hear, I think there's I don't know if it's a rumor or if it's an unconfirmed, like, rumor. But supposedly somebody has bought the Legacy of Kain series, has bought the rights to the Legacy of Kain. And
I've been hearing about things stirring with that franchise.
Like they've done polls online, like, what do you want to see from this franchise? Where would you like to see it go? Like, looking for fan input, which I think is very good. If you're going to bring back something that has been dormant for so long, there were expectations when Defiance was over as to like what direction it was going to go in. Maybe not necessarily every fan said, oh, well, this needs to happen and this needs to happen. But like story-wise, there were expectations of where it was supposed to go. And I can totally agree that for something that ended so long ago, even though you're aware of it and you can like read on paper that like this is how it ended and you could like sort of like guess what would happen next, it's not the same as if like you were there and like you had your finger on the pulse and you were like, this is what we were looking forward to. This is where like rumors were that this game was going. So I think it's really cool that they're asking the fans of like the franchise, like, what did you want to see next? Where did you think it was going to go?
And, I didn't really think about it until now, but the franchise is very similar to how the MCU works. But this was like way before that. And no, seriously, because you had two essentially separate games, Soul Reaver, Blood Omen, and then they were completely separate for two games, and then they came together for Defiance, and then you had both of them in the same game and everything. And I just think that was a very unique thing for the time. Like, you might have games that did crossovers, but that was a one-off event, or if it was very popular, you got a sequel to it. But that was usually like a fighting game. It was stuff like that. Where
Street Fighter, Marvel versus Capcom. Yeah.
But where something like this, like, you just had two parallel stories happening, and you could play as either side of it, and then it came to a conclusion, or more or less a conclusion.
Yeah, it came to a head with Defiance. What do you think about the state of video game mechanics now? Because we're talking about Legacy of Kain, and I'm thinking of Soul Reaver, and I'm thinking of when I played the first Soul Reaver. And I remembered thinking when I was playing it, well, this is just like a dark version of the Ocarina of Time. Like, it's a platformer like that. Not saying that it had like the same aesthetics.
No, I get you.
But like, he dug his claws into blocks and he was able to move them around, which is kind of like whenever Link would have to put on the boots to move things around. I feel like a lot of like, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of platformers anymore. I feel like any attempt to do anything like that just doesn't really exist much in video games anymore. That the closest you would get is, and we keep going back to this, like parkouring your way through Assassin's Creed.
See, I'll fight you on this one.
Okay,
it's only because...
honestly, you know this subject much better than me, so...
Only because my favorite game series of all time, Ratchet and Clank, is a platformer.
Right.
And I understand that part of that is kind of not an argument because Ratchet and Clank came out in 2000. However, the newest Ratchet and Clank came out a year ago.
Back up. They're still making Ratchet and Clank?
Yes, sir.
This is news to me. Like, this is how casual of a video gamer I am.
Well, look, Ratchet and Clank is not like a top-tier franchise. People don't keep up with it generally, typically speaking.
I had no idea it was still being made.
They made a movie in, I think, 2018, or maybe a little earlier than that, but they made a movie, and the marketing actually really got me because they started promoting the game, and so it was the game based on the movie that was based on the game.
Oh my gosh. See, Ratchet and Clank, I always get them mixed up with another franchise.
Jak and Daxter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there was a little bit of venom in that. A lot of people get it mixed up, don't they?
It's very common. Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank are constantly compared, and they constantly reference each other.
Oh, do they?
Oh,
Even
yeah.
in game? See, that's cool. That's kind of like how Metal Gear and Splinter Cell would reference each other in that they would actually talk about each other in game.
Daxter's little victory move he would do and spin, and then...
Not at all. Never played it.
Oh, well, in the game, the little, I don't know, lemur thing.
Okay.
Yeah. He would do this, like, typical, you win a level, he would do this little dance and then drop. In a Ratchet and Clank game, they had Clank do it randomly at the end of a challenge, and he did it, and it's like, oh, okay, it's Jak and Daxter. But yeah, they have like posters of each other in games and whatnot. In the one Ratchet and Clank game, actually, he's playing Jak and Daxter at the start of a cutscene, and then he shuts the TV off.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love when games do stuff like that. I had no idea Ratchet and Clank was still around. I didn't know platformers were still, and maybe not necessarily popular, but relevant.
Oh, they're for sure not the prominent genre they used to be.
Okay.
Like, there was a point in time, I'd probably say late 90s into the 2000s, where platformers were like the bread and butter of video games.
Oh, no, they absolutely were. And I think the thing that led that was Link. Legend of Zelda, to be completely honest. Like, because when you think platformer, like, that was the series that arguably, even in like 2D 16-bit or 32-bit graphics, you were trying to do platformers with that, whether you were moving blocks around, whether you were jumping from square to square, whatever. And I think the problem with that genre is there's really only so far you can go.
Platforming is best used as a secondary in a game. Ratchet and Clank is a platformer, but when you play it, platforming is very rarely the main focus of what you're doing. Platforming is how you traverse.
Yeah.
So it's like you want to go over here and find that treasure, you have to figure out, or you have to just get your way through this, mountainscape, whatever, to get there. But the main focus of Ratchet and Clank is the combat, the really big, obtuse weapons and crap like that.
Yeah.
Platforming has always felt secondary. But the platforming gets better the more you innovate it. So it's not just jumping here, waiting a couple seconds, jumping here, moving to the left, waiting a second. No, now there's like mechanics where he can throw his wrench and pull things to him, push things away. He can turn things off, turn things on with a bolt on the ground and everything.
See, the last real platformers I can remember playing are the Arkham games.
Yeah, that's another great example. It's a platformer by second nature.
Yeah, and like after the Arkham games were done, I really couldn't think of any other platformers after that. I mean, you still have Link, but I don't think it's between the last two games that came out that like the name of them is completely escaping me.
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild and the new one that
Tear of the Kingdom.
Sure. I feel like those are leaning more. Like, I'm not saying there's not platforming in it, but I feel like, and keep in mind I haven't played either one of them, that they are gearing more towards the big open world exploration version of the game.
They are. You are not wrong by that assumption by any means, but with a big open world means more platforming.
Okay.
Means more puzzles.
Okay.
Like, it is open world, but it's not open world in the sense of, like, you're running into people and getting a bunch of quests and doing all that. It's like open world in the sense that you walk into this cave and you're like, all right, how the crap do I get out of here?
And the platformer that actually surprised me that it lasted as long as it did, but then also came to a very sudden halt, was the Prince of Persia series.
Yeah.
Because that was, like, that series of games was like a platformer taken to, like, its nth level. That, like, platforming was the game. And the first game, I actually kind of got bored with it because it felt like I was doing the same thing over and over and over again. I'm actually surprised that it lasted as long as it did. And I'm sure you know this, and I'm sure most people, or a lot of people listening to this, know this, that, like, Assassin's Creed was born from a defunct Prince of Persia game. That they were like, we have this mechanic, we have this engine, Prince of Persia has sort of died. Okay, let's take the sands of time out of it and just have him jumping around a city. And that gave us the first Assassin's Creed game.
Which is why it's such a shame that they don't feel like Assassin's Creed games anymore. Because you can go back and play a Prince of Persia game, and arguably it will still feel like the initial Assassin's Creed games.
Yes.
But once you get past those, and it's now that whole open world thing and whatnot, I don't get that feeling.
No, and especially the first one and the second one. I didn't play Brotherhood. You told me that I should. But, like, when we got into the ones past Ezio, like, you lost a lot of the, like, jumping from post to post. Or, like, now it's just, like, it feels like it's mostly just climbing up and down surfaces, getting to the lookout, doing the leap of faith, and then the rest of the game. Like, don't get me wrong, like, even in Valhalla that I'm playing right now, you still have those moments where, like, you're running along floating debris to stay out of the ice water. But now, whenever you get up on, like, the edge of a ship and you're walking along the rail, it's like they put it there just because it's Assassin's Creed and you're always able to do that it doesn't feel like an integral component to the game anymore. It's just like, oh, I can do this now.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, in that first one with Altair, holy cow, some of the climbing and jump puzzles that you had to do in that game to get through it. Like, that, and I think it's because it came out of the Prince of Persia that, like, combat and assassination wasn't the focus of the game. Like, that I think, that game specifically, I think, started the whole one-button combat system. Like, based off of what somebody was doing, and then you could counter and then counterattack.
That I actually, now that you bring that up, I remember that being an initial joke with the Assassin's Creed series, was the fighting isn't hard. You literally hit the button to counter every time they go to attack you, and that's it.
But that wasn't the focus of it.
No, you wanted to get through the fight.
Like, now, in Valhalla, I have a light attack, a heavy attack, a bow attack, or a charged bow attack. Whereas, like, in Black Flag, I feel like was a really good hybrid of, you could play just like the parry riposte, or you could go in with your cutlass just swinging and going ham on people.
Use your guns.
Yeah.
This needs to be said on this channel before we go any farther.
Okay.
But we support Jack Black here, okay? We do. So, it kills me that when my man Jack Black got a video game, not only did he voice the main character, not only is the main character literally just him with long hair, but he recorded live action intros and like, I guess it was just the one intro. Was there an outro?
I can't remember, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was.
I'm pretty sure he recorded an intro and an outro to the game.
Yeah.
But the intro specifically plays every time you start the game up. It's just Jack Black talking to the camera and be like, hey, I gotta show you something.
Going into the record store.
Yeah, and he goes into the record store, he finds a record, pulls it out, sets it down on the table, and then the record is the start screen of the game.
Which is awesome.
That's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And the whole game, I guess I should probably say, it's called Brutal Legend.
I was wondering if you were going to get to that.
The game is called Brutal Legend. It stars Jack Black. I believe it's on an Xbox 360 and PS3. I don't know if any remasters or anything like that are out there.
No, because that's another one that nobody's really sure who owns the rights to it. That's why they've never done a sequel.
That game deserves a sequel. If you like heavy metal, if you like rock music...
And who doesn't?
Like, that game is literally based on that. The aesthetic of heavy rock, the mentality of those shows and the camaraderie, and then also just the outlandish concepts that come with rock and concept albums and everything.
If you took the cover of a heavy metal album from the 80s and stepped into it, that's Brutal Legend.
Yeah. And it's a fun game. You literally, your weapons are a giant axe and a guitar. And there's a literal move called Face Melter. And can you guess what it does? It melts every enemy's face on the battlefield.
And it's done with the electric guitar.
Yes. Also, I feel like...
it's Jack Black just going, Face Melter.
Yeah, dude. Jack Black sings. It's great. Ozzy Osbourne's in it.
Ozzy is in it. Like, Dio is in it. There's...
Lemmy
was in it. Like, there are so many... Lita Ford is in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are so many, like, metal legends that lent their voices to this game that it's like... And I had a friend who didn't buy it at first until after I told him about it, because I bought it and I was playing it, and he was like, wait a minute, is it good? I said, yeah. I said, why? He said, when I saw it, I thought it was going to be making fun of 80s metal. I said, no, this reveres 80s metal.
It pokes fun at it.
But not to like an insulting degree. Like, because truthfully, like, if you look back, like, I don't think a lot of those guys take themselves seriously at all. But like, especially Ozzy, like some of his one-liners.
Oh my god! The one that always got me, it was the most calm one. When you drove in to see him, he would turn around and be like, "Oh, hi." And that was it. Like every other one, it was some cool line.
But what I think, like, the thing that I found the most amusing about it was this game came out at the height of the Osbournes, okay? But you could understand what Ozzy was saying, which only strengthened the idea that, like, everything he was doing on the Osbournes was just an act. Mm-hmm. Like, you didn't need the subtitles on to follow what Ozzy was saying in the game. And it really does. Like, it pulls from so much, like, lore and mythology, I put that in quotes, of, like, heavy metal, 80s metal. And then, like, there's the battle between, like, heavy metal and hair metal that's involved in there.
Yeah.
Tim Curry is the voice of the bad guy. Oh, you didn't know that? Like, the big devil-looking dude? That's Tim Curry.
Dude! This game is phenomenal.
You didn't realize that?
No.
Yeah.
Dude, Tim Curry be doing some hard things, dude.
Yeah, that's him. That's him in that. And then when the one chick just turns emo.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, when she just like goes into the dark water and comes out just goth. Like, she's goth now.
But it's like all happening to Mr. Crawley by Ozzy Osbourne. Like, the soundtrack for this game is phenomenal as well. And the fact that what we're talking about here, that it never got a sequel, because there was so much more you could have done with that world. It was fantastic.
And don't get us wrong. If you take all that away, the game itself is fun. Like, you get a cool car that you can beef up. Like, it's very cartoony in the way it goes about things. And it's genuinely funny.
It has like a little bit of everything. Like, it has a really solid combat system. It has the car, so you have like a little bit of like that racing across, cross country. You can outfit the car with weapons that are just ridiculous. Like we talked about the soundtrack. There's platforming involved in it, and then they like even managed to throw in like real-time strategy component to it.
Yeah,
when like the battle of the bands concert thing.
You do two stages attacking each other and everything. Yeah,
it's really, really good.
It's not flawless.
No, no.
The gameplay's a little dated now. I'm not going to sit here and lie, but oh my god, it is such a fun game.
Yeah.
And Jack Black does so good. Genuinely, he does such a good performance that every time he tells a joke, it feels like he's actually laughing at it along with you.
Well, it's like 80s metal and 90s music. Like, it's 90s music. It's like what he grew up on. It's like what inspired him to start doing music. So like, and this was like at the height of his power. Like, this was just after like the height of his power. This was like just after like the album with Wonder Boy came out. Like, that had just come out. I think the first Kung Fu Panda was around this time too. No?
No.
Okay.
No. I think School of Rock already happened.
Okay, that's it. Yeah. School of Rock, Wonder Boy, and I can't remember what the name of that album was. Or was it just Wonder Boy?
I think it was Tenacious D, Wonder Boy.
Okay. So yeah, like Tenacious D was real big into it, and then like you got the guy fronting that band who can also act and has great comedic timing in Jack Black. It only made sense to bring him in as the main character, and like you said, it's basically just him with a sweet mullet. Like a sweet black-haired mullet.
You straight up play as Jack Black.
Yeah.
And given the like Jack Black-assance happening right now of the Peaches song and him being Bowser.
Yeah.
Like, you can see his commitment to something like that. He committed like that to this game.
He certainly did.
Growing up around video games, the ones that I played, Ratchet and Clank, Kingdom Hearts, have I played other games? God of War. Like, I feel like I have a wide array of games that I've played.
Yes.
There's just games that I don't get into. I don't get into racing games. I don't get into sports games. Fighting games are very 50-50 for me. Like, I'll play them. I'll have a good time. But there's nothing about them independently that does anything for me.
I'll be honest, fighting games just as like generic, I shouldn't even say generic, but like just fighting games just as fighting games doesn't do much for me. I do, however, get unhealthily involved into Mortal Kombat. And I do think that it's just because like I lived through Mortal Monday. Like, I was in grade school when I was in grade school playing Mortal Kombat. Okay? Like, people's heads getting ripped off, fatalities, finish him, that whole thing. Like, it's not a big deal now, but back in the 80s, yeah. Or even if you had fighting games, even fighting games that came after it, like you had Soul Calibur, okay? And a lot of moves, like sword ran through somebody, but there was no blood, there was no viscera, there was like nothing like gratuitous or violent about it other than just like an animation.
You've been stabbed.
Whereas like Mortal Kombat,
you're getting ripped.
we had never seen anything like it before, and when they ported that over to the home console, that was another one of those things where like mom groups, parent groups were like, think of the children. It's like, your children have been playing this in an arcade up until now. Now it's in the house, now you're paying attention. And that song, that commercial, Mortal Kombat. Yeah, like, so like fighting games in general don't do it for me, but like
Mortal Kombat's
I'm actually thinking of getting a new Xbox just so I can play Mortal Kombat 1.
I think you should. It'd be worth your time, because I guarantee you, if another Halo comes out, you'll want to get that.
I don't know, man. Halo's kind of let me down at this point.
No, I know. And I stand by what I said. If a new Halo comes out, you're probably going to want to get that.
And I think people underplay Nintendo's reputation for being like the family console. Like, I really think people underestimate the influence that can have in console sales, especially if you are a family with young kids in it, and it's like, hey, here's Mario Party.
So much to the point that there is exactly one console that has outsold the Wii, and that's the PS2. The PS2 is the highest selling console of all time as we speak right now, or at least as of the last time I've
I
checked.
thought it was the Game Boy.
No.
Okay.
But the Wii was number 2, and it's for 2 reasons. And I actually looked into this at one point.
Wait, the Wii, not the Switch.
No, the Wii.
Okay.
The Wii was so cheap that families would buy it.
It was like, oh my gosh, I forget. I think it was like $200 or something
No,
like that.
I'm pretty sure it was like $99.99. Like, it was a very cheap system.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other thing that got it was they used them for promotions a lot more than they ever did before, in the sense of, like, you know, we'll work with this company, and if they buy a car, you get a free Wii. We'll do, like, we'll work with this lottery company and do this little raffle, and if you win, you get a Wii. Like, they were just putting Wiis out there.
They just wanted to get them into people's hands.
And then from there, like, people just kept buying them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that, like, the Wii was a terrible system and it broke down, you had to get more or buy another one or something. It was just, like you said, it's the family console. My mom would, like, get on Wii Fit or something. And then me and my brother could sit down and play Wii Boxing.
And I know, like, a problem the Wii did have was, especially when it came to, like, third-party games, that because of how different the control system was, the coding had to be changed. And, like, there were a lot of third-party game manufacturers that were like, we're not doing that.
And look at them now.
Yeah.
They're doing it.
Yeah.
But well, there is no war. There really isn't.
Not anymore. Not like during the GameCube, Xbox, PS2 era.
And, like, it was even prevalent for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. Like, those were the games that I would, like, fight my friends over. They'd be like, oh, Xbox is better. We got Halo. And I'd be like, nah, dude, PlayStation is better. We got Ratchet.
Seeing like that's the only generation where I had all 3 consoles. And then I think a large part of that was that consoles have just gotten ridiculously overpriced for my wallet, for my dollars. Like, during the Xbox, PS2, GameCube era, the consoles weren't obscenely overpriced. Like, they weren't obscenely expensive. And that was still during the era where, like, my PS2 was a refurb that I think I paid $150 for it. And now you can't really get that anymore. Or if you do get a refurb, it's like maybe $50 cheaper than a brand new console. But, like, the PS5, I'm not including the Switch because the Switch is, once again, the cheaper of the 3. But, like, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, like, $500 to $600 for a console, you could get a gaming computer for, like not a high-end gaming computer, but, like, you could get a gaming computer, build one for just a little bit more, if not that price. And from what I understand, that's basically what the Series X is.
Dude, look, I started saying this a couple years ago. I don't think Microsoft is going to keep making the Xbox. I genuinely don't.
They'll go to Steam and computer and...
The only other thing that I can see them doing is at some point the Xbox is literally just going to become a computer. Because after a certain point, you can't look at a PlayStation or an Xbox and be like, oh, well, this is so much better than a PC, let's charge more for it. When the PC, even today, does more. Like, I'm a console person. I'll probably continue being a console person for the foreseeable future. But... they're computers.
Yeah.
It's just slightly different, faces, slightly different brands, but it's all just a computer. So the people that are like, oh, PC master race and that whole shtick, it's like, you're not wrong. The computer's better. It does more if you put the money into it, and it's more adaptable and customizable. But, like, you put all that money in to play a game. I bought this system, I bought the same game. And I guarantee you, it cost me a lot less money than some of these people have put into their PCs.
And that's really the thing that has been holding me off on getting an Xbox Series X, like knowing Mortal Kombat 1 is coming out. And there's been a couple of other games that I've thought, hey, that would be cool to play, but it's not like, oh, I need it. It's just like, it's ridiculously overpriced. And if you can afford it, like I'm not sitting here hating on people that can afford it. Like if you can afford it and you want to go out and get it, that's cool. You do you. But for me, like I said, being the more casual player that I am, I feel like they did leave the casuals behind on this one. That like they have started catering to the gamer, which isn't bad, but I feel like they might have narrowed their sales that way. I may be completely wrong about that, but I feel like
I think you need to just adapt where you're looking and playing games, because casual gaming is more popular than it's ever been. And part of that is to do with the phone and apps and just those kind of very casual games. Not that I'm saying in a mean way. They're just, you move your finger and match blocks. But honestly, you'd probably be more into a PC and stream and Steam and all that. And it's mainly just because you can download a game, play it. If you don't like it, you're done. You just close it, you move on. And you can get those more casual games. Whereas a console, it's more geared towards you're going to go out and spend $60 on this game and you're going to spend the next 30 hours playing it.
I do miss those long-running games. I really miss the games that you could like put 100 hours into it and not even that it's like you beat the game and then you keep playing. Like I miss those like 100-hour games, like to get to the end, like the ones where you really feel like you've gone on like a journey to get there. Let us know, like if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on YouTube, like I'm genuinely curious to hear like people's like video game experiences, because I do feel like this genre, this media, there are so many different, everything from like the Twitch streamer to like the person that just plays Candy Crush. Like I think that's what has made video games so endearing and has made them last as long as they have, and why they're in like almost every facet of society, because there is something for everyone with this genre, with this media style.
I mean, a great example being all the people that play Animal Crossing. I will sit here and tell you that half the people that have played Animal Crossing probably have not played many other games.
I've played Animal Crossing. I had the first one and I got so bored with it.
Yeah.
Like I can see what the appeal is for a certain fan, for a certain player, but for me, it just like, I don't know. There's nothing there to like really grab me.
I mean, I don't know if you're the same as me, but for me it boils down to the fact that I don't feel like I'm ever doing anything.
Yeah.
Like why am I building a house? Why do I care if this place looks good? Why do I want people here? Yeah. And it's just like, well, it's because you do.
Like, it's not like in real life where like you take care of your house because it's a matter of pride because people come over. If you're in a video game and it's like, well, you have to do this to do this, this, and this. Okay, but why am I doing it? Like it's a game. You need to incentivize people to do things. I don't understand how people can get that wrapped up into it. I can believe that people do, and I'm not throwing shade at the ones that do, but for me, it's just so boring. And I am genuinely glad there are people that can get as much entertainment and enjoyment out of something so simple as that.
Like, they're popular for a reason. So many people play them for a reason. And more power to them, honestly. I hope they make a new Animal Crossing for those people. It's just, I'll never buy it.
And there are a bunch of Animal Crossing knockoffs because that's Nintendo only. There's like an Xbox version of it that I can't remember what it's called right now, and I'm sure there's a PlayStation version of it to just like feed into that particular
niche.
Yeah, because if Nintendo hadn't done it, going back to this is the family-friendly console, if Nintendo hadn't done it, who else would have thought of doing something like Animal Crossing?
Nope, no one, dude. It is a product of its people, and I am not its people. The new Animal Crossing is like, what, the third game in the series or something?
I think so, and I think the other thing that like makes the series popular is that the games are so long in the tooth that because people spend so much time on their house, on their town, on their island, whatever, they don't want the next new game because they have perfected what they have here.
And look, like I said, more power to those people. It's just, that is not the realm of gaming that appeases me personally.
And when the Switch, I think it was with the Switch, when the Switch went online and you can visit other people's islands now.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that opened up a whole new realm of gameplay, being able to trade back and forth, being able to, like, fly or take a boat to, like, your friends' islands. Like, that I can also see the appeal to. But, like, I'll just come over to your house.
Yeah, like I have a car in the real world.
Yeah.
We can talk face to face. Hey, you know what, Rob? I got a great idea. You want to do a podcast in real world? Not Animal Crossing world?
Oh my, now that you said that out loud, though, I can see that there probably are people that, like, do a podcast in their Animal Crossing personas. It happens. It has to happen. I have to imagine. It's like the video game version of furries. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Ralph World.
Ralph World. We gotta do that again.
Please come back next week. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to be talking about. We've kicked around a few ideas. We're still getting ideas for the episodes down. We have a lot on the back burner. We just aren't exactly sure what order we want to do them in yet. But thank you for bearing with us. Hope you enjoyed this one.
And for anyone out there listening, Spotify, YouTube, if you guys ever have any suggestions of a topic you might want us to hear to talk about, given the generational difference and everything, if it's a topic we think we can fill the time with, that we have anything worthwhile to even say about, like, we'll 100% consider it, talk about it between ourselves. Like, we want you guys to feel involved with this as much as we are involved with making it.
You can leave a comment on YouTube, or you can find me at Brick and Tire on Instagram and Threads.
On YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, I am Uncle_Britt on all of them.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.